Deborah Sampson disguised herself as Robert Shirtliff and fought for the Patriots in the American Revolution for over 2 years, and even took a bullet out of her own leg so the doctors wouldn't find out she was a woman. She was later found out by a doctor when she got sick, but was honorably discharged and became the only woman to receive a full military pension for fighting in the Revolution. Lyudmila Pavlichenko was a Russian sniper during World War II who had 309 confirmed kills. Americans fell in love with her when she went on a press tour during the war. She became great friends with Eleanor Roosevelt, and the two had an emotional reunion in Moscow in the late 1950s in the height of the Cold War. Irene England was one of over 1,100 women Air Force service pilots, aka the WASPs, that flew transport and training missions during World War II. 38 of these pilots lost their lives in the 2 years the program lasted, and the women were not even given military status until the 1970s. Many times they had to pay their own room and board, and even joined together to pay for fellow pilots' funeral costs. In 2010, the 300 surviving WASPs received the Congressional Medal of Honor. You can't have a female soldiers list without Joan of Arc. She was the famous French soldier who led the army against the English in the 100 Years' War when she was only a teenager. Her extreme religious beliefs caused just as much of an uproar as her military campaigns. She was put on trial by allies of the English and was eventually burned at the stake. Kudayun was Genghis Khan's great-great-granddaughter that Marco Polo wrote about. The story goes that if you could beat her in wrestling, that you could marry her. But if you lost, you had to give up 100 horses. In one particular case, by the end of one night, she had won thousands of horses and earned the nickname Princess of 10,000 Horses. Grace O'Malley was an Irish pirate queen who inherited the land, cattle, and ships of her late husband at the age of 23. There are numerous stories of her fearless fighting style, including shooting 2 Turkish officers the day after she gave birth, but most remember her for her meeting with Elizabeth I. There are numerous conflicting stories about refusing to bow or blowing her nose in a handkerchief and then throwing it into the fire, and the list goes on. She survived the meeting and ended up dying in 1603, the same year as Queen Elizabeth. Penthesilea was an Amazon queen in Greek mythology who fought for Troy in the Trojan War. She was eventually killed by the famous Achilles, but her legacy and that of other Amazonian warriors lives on through pop culture and even comic book heroes like Wonder Woman. Aruela was a Somali queen from the 1st century that took very drastic measures to change the gender roles of her kingdom. She is infamous for castrating numerous males and attempting to uproot the patriarchal system that thrived during and after her time period. The Trung sisters were martial arts masters that eventually defeated the occupying Han dynasty from present-day Vietnam. Their reign only lasted 3 years, but they are viewed as symbols of resistance to this day in modern-day Vietnam, with many temples in their honor. Pontia Artishbad was the leader of the Persian Immortal Army in the 6th century. Serving under Cyrus the Great, her and her husband ran probably the most elite fighting force in Asia, whose training started at age 7. She was not only a brilliant commander and fighter, but it was rumored that she was so beautiful that she covered her face during battle, so no one would fall in love with her. Boudica was a 1st century British queen who earned the name Headhunter Queen after her brutal war tactics. She killed tens of thousands of Romans and burnt what would later be called London on her quest to regain her land stolen by the Romans. She almost caused the Romans to leave Britain altogether, but the Romans eventually squashed the uprising and continued their reign.